This is the eLearn podcast. If you're passionate about the future of learning, you're in the right place. The expert guests on this show provide insights into the latest strategies, practices, and technologies for creating killer online learning outcomes. My name's Ladek, and I'm your host from Open LMS. The eLearn podcast is sponsored by eLearn Magazine, your go-to resource for all things online learning. Click-by-click how-to articles, the latest in edtech, spotlight on successful outcomes and trends in the marketplace. Subscribe today and never miss a post at elearnmagazine.com. And Open LMS, a company leveraging open source software to deliver effective, customized, and engaging learning experiences for schools, universities, companies, and governments around the world since 2005. Learn more at openlms.net. Hello, my name's Ladek, and my guest for this episode is Omer Glass, the CEO and co-founder of GrowthSpace, the world's first outcome-focused talent development platform. In this outcome-oriented conversation, Omer and I talk about the top 3 issues in adult lifelong learning and upskilling that GrowthSpace addresses. Then we talk about the challenges that Omer and the GrowthSpace team grapple with and their approach to scalability with such a user-focused platform. We then move on to the options users have in GrowthSpace to make it truly their own pathway, especially when they are paired with experts that they don't like. We then talk about the big elephant in the room for everyone these days, which is how AI is going to be impacting everything. Omer and I discuss how GrowthSpace is including AI going forward and what type of feedback they've received from their clients and users. We then end our conversation, as we do with everybody here, and Omer tells us what he and GrowthSpace are excited about for the near future. Now, remember, we record this podcast live so that we can interact with you, our listeners, in real time. So if you'd like to join the fun every week on LinkedIn or Facebook or YouTube, just come over to elearnmagazine.com and subscribe. Now, I give you Omer Glass. Omer, you are the CEO and the co-founder of a company called GrowthSpace that operates in the HR universe, something that's intimately connected to learning and development, adult lifelong learning, upskilling, et cetera. That's what we're going to be talking about today. But before we do, where do we find you sitting?
I'm in Israel today.
Which part of Israel?
It's actually called Binyamina, which is 1 hour north of Tel Aviv.
Okay, fantastic, excellent. And for everybody who doesn't know, it's we're recording this on April 15th. What's it like? Like what's the weather like right now? Like, I mean, has spring sprung? Are you are you in the heat of the summer? What's the deal?
It's kind of like I think it's kind of like Miami, so it's hot all year long, very low rainfall. So Israel is perfect for weather, for other stuff less, but yeah.
Excellent. Super cool. And so as I love to do for our guests here on the show, I could kind of butcher your bio and talk about the wonderful things that you've done, but why don't you take, the 60 seconds to introduce yourself? Like, how did you come into GrowthSpace? How did you get it started? What's it all about?
Sure. So the story of GrowthSpace starts, again, I will not take the credit for the idea because it came from my co-founder and our COO, Dan. So before joining me, Dan was a COO of a data company called Signals Analytics. And basically they had a relatively high attrition, like they grew quite fast and the employees started leaving, and he tried to understand why people were leaving the company. So he realized people were leaving the company after doing some pulse surveys and exit interviews that they didn't feel the company invested enough in their development. So he said, good, I have a problem. Let's solve the problem by introducing a lot of learning development tools that are out there. So like learning tools, some workshops, etc. And then he spent like nice amount of money on that and try to understand whether this thing had made an impact, like his ex-consultant, ex-Bain. So he tried to measure the impact on what he did. And he saw that there was not only not a positive impact, the impact even was negative. So it's kind of like, I have a negative ROI. What do I do? So he called me and he asked me, Omer, how do you create effective employee development And then my intuitive response, and you had some experience in the space, my intuitive response was nobody really knows. Why nobody really knows? Because you do not work with data. It's kind of like I like to take the equivalence of performance marketing. How do you know that something works? You try something, you measure it. If it works, you scale it. If it doesn't work, you kill it, right? Now, a lot of times in learning and development, you just introduce a tool and then you measure participation, satisfaction, etc., but you don't really see the outcome. So we said, we really believe that learning and development is a business critical function, but sometimes it doesn't being perceived that way by the business. So we said, okay, let's help organizations to make L&D business critical. So that's kind of like was the mission where we started. And then the place we started with is what we call human to human development, which is the part of L&D where humans help other humans grow. So it can be vendors, like you can think of sales trainer, management training, a communication workshop, or a coach or a mentor that you bring to help an individual, right? And it can be from within the company or an external vendor, but basically we took this whole space into one platform that helps organizations to run this human-to-human development and also to prove their impact on real business KPIs.
How this is I'm very interested to see how we unpack this here, because let's step back. So what are the, break down for me like the top 3, issues in, adult continuous learning, that your co-founder, was discovering. I mean, ultimately you're saying there was an underlying data piece that wasn't being addressed, etc. Like what were those, what are the 3 big things in human, in adult upskilling? Been talking about AI way too much here. In human upskilling that that GrowthSpace is addressing.
So I can look at it from the organization level and I can look at it from the individual level.
Okay.
So from the organization level, there are 3 things. It's performance, attrition, and promotability, or building promotable base usually. You want people to do better what they do. So you want better engineering velocity, better sales conversions, better operational activity, effectiveness. You want lower attrition. You want the good people, the top talents to stay on board. And you want to be able to basically raise the next generation to basically build a promotable base. Usually we help organizations with those 3 topics. Again, this is the corporate level. Usually we work B2B, less like not B2C. And in the individual level, the nice thing about what we do is there are a lot of things humans need. So again, upskilling, it's not a generic thing, because sometimes you need to work on your communications, sometimes you need to work on your presentation, sometimes on your storytelling, sometimes on your account-based marketing, sometimes on your sales or leadership or management, etc. So there are basically a lot of skills, and our platform is basically built on a skill taxonomy that helps organization to find the right expert to the right need, the specific need of a participant or a group.
Hi there. I'm sorry to break into the show right now, but if you're enjoying this show, if you are challenged, if you're inspired, if you're learning something, if you think that you're going to be able to get something out of this to put into your practice, do me a quick favor. Pause right now and just hit subscribe on your podcast player right now. It doesn't matter which one, just hit subscribe, because that way it'll make sure that you never miss an episode in the future. Thanks. Now, back to the show. If I am an individual in one of the companies that you work with, take me through the process. Like, I guess what I'm trying to do is get us to a place where reducing the complexity of continuing to grow myself, to continue to flex and as you say, become more promotable, become more effective, etc. One of the biggest issues that I know for most people is I just don't have time to do that, right? I don't have, I can't find space in my day. And then when I'm presented with that space or that time, there's usually like, it's complexity. I've got to invest in it as well. So as an individual in an organization, how are you presenting them with opportunities that are digestible, that seem relatively, reasonable to take on, and are not, that typical, hey, go to a classroom, get a new degree, get a new certification kind of stuff?
Yeah. So we take the approach, we try to take the approach of like, okay, let's say you're an executive. Like I'm a CEO. If I need something, usually if I need to upskill myself on, I don't know, managing a board meeting or I don't know, like finance or leadership or communicating my vision, I will not go to an e-learning class, right? I will find someone who can help me with exactly what I need. So the most efficient thing that we're doing four things. It's one-on-one coaching, mentoring, training. It's team coaching, kind of like 6 people in one room, workshops, and internal mentoring. So the most efficient thing you can do in order to upskill, and the more like everything is digestible, but the one-on-one is the most efficient because again, I'm working with you on the specific thing that you need. So you get basically a human that specializes. This is all they do. Like you need to work on your storytelling, so you will work with a master storyteller, like a storyteller expert on your specific storytelling skills, for example. So it can be communications, etc. Now, when it's presented to like people love it because people want to grow. People want to grow their career, want to be better. That will help them to be like succeed in their existing role, to be promotable in the organization, and again to equip them for their career.
Fantastic. What are the challenges that you find that you're still, coming up against, or that you have, when you start to work with a company? What are the challenges for implementation of something like this? I can see that, doing something like this at scale would be a significant lift, a significant effort for a company. So if I'm looking at a company with, 20, 30 people, great. When I start to get into the hundreds, this could become an issue. When I start to get into the thousands, a real big issue. Like what are your approaches for scalability of something like this?
So first of all, we built product and technology that makes it much easier because, as you said, like we usually we start working with companies usually when they're like in the 200 employees, but it goes all the way up to like Fortune 50s. Now, usually the deployment piece can be challenging for companies, but we built basically a product that makes deployment easy. So deployment is all about communication. So let's say you're a learning and development professional and you want to launch this new one-on-one program, for example. Let's piggyback on my last example. Now you need to communicate it to the HR business partners. You need to communicate it to the managers. You need to communicate it to the employees. You want to engage everyone. You want to market it internally. You want to surface like a case studies, why this thing worth your time, etc., etc., etc. You need to sell it maybe to the function leader. So there are a lot of different elements in the deployment. And this is how we basically design the product in order to make it easy as possible. Now, I would say that the biggest hurdle we're facing is usually when you do not have the learning and development function. This usually happens with small organizations, but if you have a learning and development organization in place, a function, even if it's a one-person team, then deployment becomes really easy because the product is basically tailored to a structure where you have learning and development, HR business partners, managers, functional managers, and participants.
All right, excellent. Can you? I appreciate that case story there. Can you? I'm wondering how specific or granular it could be in sort of an aha moment with maybe either. I don't know if you're able to mention clients or those types of things where they were doing things the traditional way, right? They were looking at their ongoing employee upskilling and their sort of adult education in sort of a traditional way. They've moved to your system and here's the 3 things that they found, and wow, the kind of feedback that they've received.
So I will just share a case study that we recently published. So it's I can just talk about it freely. So it's a company called Cognite, 2,000 employees, and they basically spun off a company. So they just listed on NASDAQ and just started kind of like fresh. And they had like the mother company who had their own traditional learning and development. They started working with us, number one, because they wanted to be outcome driven. So they wanted to drive their Glint, which is HR analytics platform metrics, around engagement for their top talents, because they know that engagement is linked with attrition, like better engagement, lower attrition. So they wanted to basically improve their engagement among a very specific population of a top talent. Now, usually it's hard to drive metrics with learning and development tools, but this is how we built a GrowthSpace. So we started with basically we divided their top talent population into two. One part received GrowthSpace, the other part didn't, and then we saw what was the difference in their engagement metrics at Glean for the two populations. And we saw that basically the test group who got GrowthSpace got 8% higher than the control group, right? So we basically really attributed an 8-point increase for like the desired population. So this is number one, the ability to connect the impact of a program within 3 months to business KPIs or organizational KPIs. Number two, with this company, we're doing a one-on-one coaching and mentoring. We're doing workshops and we're doing internal mentoring. So it's the consolidation piece. It's like kind of like instead of working with one vendor on a workshop, another vendor on this workshop, another vendor on this workshop, another vendor on coaching, another vendor on internal mentoring, you just do everything in one platform. So it just becomes easy because you don't need to source vendors, payments, etc. And you just have kind of like when you're looking for a hotel, you're going to booking.com, right? Wherever you are in the world, because you know that it will be simple. It will be like you see ratings, so it will be high quality, etc. So I think that's the second aha moment or a wow. And the third one will be the results, like the data, the way the platform is built. It's an ongoing match rate repeat process. So basically, we match an expert to an individual or a group. We rate the results based on feedback of the participant and direct manager. And then we do it again and again and again. So the platform becomes better and better and better. So you basically understand who is good in what. Because when the platform matches you or a group, let's say a group wants to work on communication skills. So you're being matched with a communication expert, and kind of like in booking.com or Airbnb that you have the ratings of the hotel. So you have the ratings of the experts from similar engagements in similar companies. So you have better, like higher certainty on the actual quality of the expert.
What happens, take me through a scenario if I'm a group or I'm an individual and I'm matched with somebody and maybe they got a great ratings and they've had great feedback, but we're just, we're not a good fit. Either our personalities don't work or there's some other piece. Like what are my options there to be able to say, hey, I'd like to choose someone else, or, throw me back into the roulette.
Yeah. So if it's a one-on-one process, you can ask for a rematch after the first meeting. It's totally okay. It happens. Our stats show that it happens in 3 to 5% of the cases. So out of 100 participants, you will have 3 to 5 people who ask to change the expert. Totally fine. You change the expert, you start over again with another expert, because chemistry is an important thing, and not everything you can predict with data. That's number one. Number two, if it's a group, like if it's a workshop, they can basically, usually workshops are shorter engagements. So usually a one-on-one sprint will be 5 sessions on average, and a workshop will be 1 to 3 sessions, but then you will have prep sessions with the expert when you can basically feel the expert, tailor the content, see some past engagements, etc. So you have high visibility and eventually lower probability of failure.
It sounds perfect. So what are the challenges that when you, as the co-founder, the CEO, what are the big issues that you're working on right now? Are there certain trends that you're following? Are there certain pieces about upskilling, et cetera, that you're particularly focused on that either your company isn't addressing right now, the GrowthSpace isn't addressing, or that you're excited to add in, et cetera?
So the complexity of our business is basically that companies need a lot of different skills to work on. Upskilling is almost limitless because different people have a lot of different needs. And one size doesn't fit all. So it's not like you're bringing a coach and the same coach can do sales and account-based marketing and agile training and communication and management, right? Like you have a lot of different skills. So it means that you need a lot of different experts. So it means that we come to companies, and currently we have 80 different categories of skills where every expert can tag themselves on up to 2.
You said 80, like 80, right?
80, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So 80 different basically categories. This is what we call our skill taxonomy. And it's very granular because like if you come like join GrowthSpace as an expert, probably you can tag yourself. You can become, for example, a learning development expert. And maybe you're a really good interviewer, so you can work on communication skills. But that's all you will do at GrowthSpace. Like you will not do management, you will not do leadership, etc. And now the challenge is you come to companies and sometimes they need things that are not necessarily on our taxonomy. So it's basically a coverage challenge. And basically every month we increase and build more and more and more pieces to our skill taxonomy and bring the relevant experts in order to get a better and better and better coverage.
Fantastic. The big elephant in the room for everyone these days is how artificial intelligence is going to be impacting everything. What's the outlook for your platform, your tools, and how you're implementing that going forward?
So we started in 2019 before anyone talked about AI. And we built our matching. Matching is a very, very complicated exercise. We took a lot of inspiration from a company called Word 50. Probably you're familiar with them. It's like a very, very wide glove service of matching the perfect like CEO to CEO. So if you're a CEO in a shipping company in Singapore struggling with a pre-IPO, they will find you the perfect match. They have basically a horde of analysts and a crazy network, and it's very, very expensive and like a really like upmarket product, but they will find you the perfect match. Now, how do you do that at scale with like thousands of people? And that's basically where the matching algorithm, why the matching algorithm is so important. So we built from scratch our matching algorithm with AI. So that was basically the first AI implication at GrowthSpace, is building a mechanism that will find each individual or each group their perfect match out of a lot of different parameters. So that's number one. Number two, there are a lot of different applications that we currently embed into our programs. For example, with, again, OpenAI, for example, to make this skill selection easier. Sometimes you're, let's say it's a manager-led program where manager is basically giving their employee a program. Okay, I want you, following up on our feedback, I want you to work on your delegation skills, right? That's what you need to work on. So sometimes for managers, not for learning development people, but for managers or participants, it's hard to understand what do I need to work on specifically. Do I need to work on my leadership skills or my delegation skills or my storytelling, etc.? OpenAI really helps there because it makes kind of like a taxonomy selection to a conversational selection. So for example, this is one thing, and then you basically talk with the chat, and you talk about outcomes and you talk about things you observe that you cannot necessarily connect to skills, but the algorithm will help it. It will help you choose the right skill to the behaviors that you observe.
Mm. What has been your, obviously in the application that you have, it sounds like it's seamlessly built in. And so there are, I would assume most individuals don't even realize that they're interacting with the technology in this way. Has there been any pushback, any, sort of, hey, let's think about ethical gaps or, data privacy concerns, those kinds of things in interacting with AI in this way? Or is that still, it's 2 layers down, and so people aren't really coming at you with that?
So the ethical gaps, usually there can be ethical gaps in the matching process, and we designed everything, for example, and sometimes customers come to us and ask us, okay, I want these people from this specific race to be matched with the people from this specific race. But then this is an ethical problem, because you cannot give and tag people according to their race, right? So usually this is kind of, it can be an obstacle working with companies, and it happened to us a lot of times, that it was very important for us to build our matching algorithm in a really like D&I and like a really equitable way. Like we do not tag gender, we do not tag race, etc. We just tag the skill, because you're a professional, you need to work with someone that they will be able to help you with the specific skill. So we really try to avoid these biases. In terms of ChatGPT, we didn't encounter any like ethical problems yet, because usually we use it around the matching, around the skill selection, around like, again, some communications, but not around the exact engagement that happens between like the vendor, like the coach, mentor, and trainer to the individual or group.
Omer, this has been a fascinating conversation. Really interested to think about how this can scale up and provide. Before I ask you my usual last question, talk to me about the interactions that you have with the clients that you're working with right now. But then also, I'm going to be so bold as to say, sort of thinking of your forward sales process. Do you find that when you're acting with HR departments these days, it's, the conversation about data first it's just a no-brainer? Everybody's like, yes, we want to figure out how to do this. Or is there still, do you ever find, like there's still a generational gap of people who are like, we understand that it's kind of important, but we have our own process and we want to continue to do it our way, kind of thing?
So I think what's common for every function in every organization in the world is that the work, again, I'm talking about business, not about a nonprofit. They work in an environment that eventually you want to show one slide to the management. This was the problem, this is what we did, and this was the result. And it's the same for every company in the world. And I see our job in like helping them to create this slide. And sometimes we're helping them to create this slide for the first time. Like there was one customer, an ad tech company, like a mid enterprise. I think it was around 1,000 employees. That they wanted to prove that with learning and development, they can lower customer churn and increase engineering effectiveness, for example. So we just did like an A/B test, like I described before, and we showed them like that we just drove two metrics. Like customer churn dropped for the specific audience, their book of business in 7%, engineering effectiveness dropped in increased in 5%. And they just showed the management one slide with just two metrics, before and after, test group, control group, and the response of like the CEO was, give me more. So I think this is common for every business in the world. Every business needs to basically show the ROI on what they do, especially now in times of recession.
Absolutely. So, and on that note, the final question I always ask everybody is, what are you excited about for either your organization, what you're developing, or maybe other things that are coming down the pipe in, the near future, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months out? What are you looking at on the horizon that has you excited?
So I think the OpenAI, it's like, I don't think most people understand the impact it's going to like create on our lives. And I think it's much more like product, like implementing OpenAI into product becomes kind of like a commodity. A lot of companies do that. But I think the really exciting thing is how you can implement it in every aspect of your business. Like you're implementing it in HR, in finance, in sales, in marketing, in R&D. So it's so broad and it's so efficient in like a lot of ways. So I'm really excited. And like actually tomorrow, like we have, I hope our employees are not watching this, but we have in our all hands, really like ask to really crowdsource more and more and more ideas of OpenAI like implementation in their functions. So I think this is something really big for any company.
I am also, we're putting on the AI and Learning Conference here in June 20 to 22nd. I couldn't be more on the same side of the table in terms of we have yet to even think about the impact that this is going to have on so many things, but mostly I think in a very, very positive way, especially learning and development. The efficiencies, just the efficiencies that it brings are absolutely incredible. Omer Glass, you are the co-founder and CEO of GrowthSpace. I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your evening over there in Israel to talk to me today, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
Thank you again for listening to the eLearn podcast here from OpenLMS. I just wanted to ask one more time, if you enjoyed this show, if you learned something, if you were inspired, if you were challenged, if you feel like, this is something you can take into your practice, please do me a favor. And right now on your podcast player, hit subscribe. That way you're never going to miss a future episode. Also, come over to elearnmagazine.com and subscribe there as well, because we have tons of great information about how to create killer online learning outcomes. Thanks.